whoa. Ooh. Ooh. Chui. やばいよ。
At 4:27 in the afternoon, the ground beneath Kumamoto shook so violently that Japan's own seismic scale hit its maximum reading. Not close to the maximum. The maximum. Shindo 7. The scale stops there. There is no level 8. A magnitude 7.1 earthquake struck Kyushu Island at a depth of just 10 kilometers, directly beneath one of Japan's most densely populated regions. And what happened in the minutes and hours that followed is still developing right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because aftershocks are still coming in, rescue operations are ongoing, and the Prime Minister of Japan has told residents in the hardest-hit areas to prepare for another earthquake of similar size. Let us start with what the maximum shaking level actually means, because the numbers matter here. Japan measures ground shaking on its own intensity scale, separate from earthquake magnitude. Magnitude measures the total energy released by the fault. Intensity measures how violently the ground moved at a specific location. A deep offshore earthquake can have a high magnitude but low surface intensity. A shallow earthquake directly beneath a city can have a lower magnitude but maximum surface intensity. This earthquake was 10 kilometers deep, shallower than a cruising passenger aircraft flies. At that depth, almost none of the energy was absorbed by the rock between the rupture and the surface. It hit homes, roads, and buildings with almost full force. That is how a magnitude 7.1 delivers Shindo 7. The level at which you cannot stand, furniture does not slide but launches, and unreinforced structures fail. Now let us look at what is on the ground. The most alarming scene is unfolding at an Aeon shopping mall in the town of Uki. An explosion tore through the second floor of the building, followed by a partial structural collapse. Thick white smoke rose from the wreckage as rescue teams moved through fallen debris and twisted steel searching for survivors. Between 20 and 30 mall employees could not be reached in the hours after the quake. At least one death has been confirmed. Authorities have warned the toll from the mall alone could rise. At a paper factory in Yatsushiro, a tall industrial chimney collapsed during the shaking. Several workers remain unaccounted for. The company says it has been unable to make contact with a portion of its staff. Rescue teams have been dispatched. Across Kumamoto Prefecture, at least 12 buildings have collapsed. 4 of those sites had people confirmed trapped inside during the initial response. More than 100 people have been injured across the region. 2 hospitals reported receiving at least 50 injured patients each within hours of the quake, with staff describing a steady stream of ambulances bringing people with burns and fractures. One hospital reported water leaks and electrical failures inside the building itself, even as it tried to treat the wounded.
Yes.
Around 50,000 households across Kumamoto lost electricity. The main Kumamoto expressway sustained damage that disrupted regional transport. A major highway bridge buckled. Bullet train services were suspended as engineers inspected tracks. Kumamoto Airport closed its runway for several hours before reopening after inspections were completed. Fires broke out across the prefecture following the shaking. Emergency lines at the Uki Regional Fire Headquarters were overwhelmed. Multiple building fires were reported simultaneously. Kumamoto City confirmed fires and trapped individuals at more than one location. 300,000 residents across Kumamoto Prefecture have been instructed to seek shelter at designated evacuation centers. Convenience stores saw immediate panic buying, with shelves emptying within hours of the quake. A tsunami advisory was issued within minutes for the Ariake and Yatsushiro seas, with waves of up to 1 meter expected.
Yes.
Coastal residents moved to higher ground. The advisory was lifted after monitoring stations detected no significant wave activity. But even a 1 meter wave is not survivable in all circumstances. Moving water at that height can remove adults from their feet, overturn vehicles, and drag people into currents they cannot escape. The swift lifting of the advisory was good news. The initial warning was appropriate given what had just happened. Japan's nuclear regulator confirmed the Sendai nuclear power plant sustained no damage and continues to operate safely. That is the single most important early confirmation. Japan's defense ministry has mobilized approximately 3,600 military personnel for disaster relief, along with 20 aircraft conducting aerial damage surveys across the region. Now let us talk about what makes this situation particularly concerning, and it comes down to one word: Kumamoto. In April 2016, this same region was struck by a sequence of major earthquakes. It began with a magnitude 6.5 on April 14th. Intensity 7. People believed the worst had passed. Emergency workers moved in. Residents who had fled began to think about returning. 28 hours later, a magnitude 7.3 struck the same area. The first earthquake had not been the main shock. It had been the foreshock, the warning that nobody recognized as a warning until the larger earthquake arrived. The 2016 sequence ultimately killed close to 275 people, injured thousands more, damaged more than 200,000 homes, and caused economic losses of several trillion yen. Kumamoto Castle, one of Japan's most treasured landmarks, suffered the collapse of sections of its ancient stone walls. Restoration work was still incomplete when Tuesday's earthquake struck. Japan's meteorological agency advises that for roughly 1 to 2 weeks after a large earthquake, a quake of comparable size can follow. The Prime Minister's statement urging residents in the hardest-hit areas to stay alert for earthquakes of similar scale is not just standard guidance. In Kumamoto, it is backed by lived experience. This ground has done this before. The 2016 sequence proved it. Seismologists use what is called Both's Law as a rough benchmark. The largest aftershock in a sequence typically measures about 1.1 to 1.2 magnitude units below the main shock. Applied here, that suggests watching for aftershocks in the magnitude 5.9 to 6.0 range. That is a benchmark, not a prediction, and it is not a ceiling. But it tells you what to expect. And here is why that matters even if those aftershocks are smaller than the main event. The buildings, roads, retaining walls, and slopes in Kumamoto have already absorbed Shindo 7 shaking. They are damaged. A magnitude 6 aftershock landing on already compromised structures does not need to be as powerful as the original quake to cause collapse. It only needs to be strong enough to finish what the first earthquake started. Aftershocks have already been recorded at magnitude 5.6 and 4.9 in the hours after the main shock. Seismologists are watching the aftershock map closely. If the aftershocks stay tightly clustered around Uki, this is a normal sequence beginning to wind down. If they start forming a line northeast or southwest along the fault, scientists will be asking whether stress is being transferred to the next segment of the Futagawa and Hinagu fault zones, the same system that ruptured in 2016. Until that aftershock map exists and that pattern becomes clear, no one in Japan can tell you the worst is over. And in 2016, the worst came second. Japan is the best prepared country on Earth for exactly this kind of event. Since the catastrophic 2011...
At 9:30 at night, the ground beneath the Mantro Valley in Peru started shaking, and it was dark. A shallow earthquake struck the Chupaca area of Junin region, inland, directly beneath densely populated communities, with an epicenter less than 16 miles below the surface. Within minutes, reports were coming in from locals. Collapsed homes, injured people, trapped individuals, power outages cutting off entire communities in the middle of the night. Urgent calls for help from villages in the epicentral zone. This is a developing situation, and the darkness is making everything worse. Subscribe and turn on notifications before we go further. Because the full picture of what happened in Peru tonight is still forming, aftershocks are already occurring, and the structural risk in the affected communities has not ended with the first shock. Let us start with the numbers, because they explain everything about why a magnitude that would be manageable in many countries is so alarming in this specific location. The USGS initially reported the earthquake at between magnitude 5.1 and 5.5. The moment tensor analysis, the scientific measurement of exactly how the fault moved, confirmed a depth of approximately 11.5 kilometers, just over 7 miles beneath the surface. That is extremely shallow for an inland crustal earthquake. The moment tensor also confirmed the fault type, almost pure reverse thrust movement, with a 90% double couple component, meaning the seismic energy was overwhelmingly consistent with ordinary tectonic slip on a fault rather than any other source. In plain terms, a compression fault beneath the Andes was locked, accumulated stress, and then suddenly slipped. One block of crust was thrust upward over the other.
Personal militar formado por aquí. Personal militar.
Viviendas no han colapsado. Están aquí todas las autoridades del sistema sanitario también. Vivienda. Están tapándose con...
Marita, nosotros vamos ayudando con
The energy from that movement reached the surface within seconds, and the communities sitting above it had almost no warning. The shaking intensity in the epicentral zone near Chupaca has been estimated at modified Mercalli intensity 7. That level of shaking is serious. It is powerful enough to crack weak structures, topple adobe walls,
¡Ey, aléjense de la pared, señor!
Corriendo con el... ¿Los puedes sacar?
bring down parts of homes, and trigger localized collapse, particularly in older rural construction that was never designed to resist seismic loading. In the Montaro Valley communities affected tonight are built primarily
11 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami that killed nearly 20,000 people and triggered the Fukushima nuclear disaster. Japan has invested heavily in early warning systems, building codes, evacuation infrastructure, and public preparedness. The response to Tuesday's earthquake reflects that investment. Military deployed within hours, emergency operations centers activated, evacuation orders issued and followed. But Shindo 7, directly beneath a city of 700,000 people, tests every system. Rescue operations at the collapsed mall and the damaged factory are expected to continue around the clock. Damage assessments are still ongoing across the region. The full casualty count and financial toll will take days to calculate. What we know right now is that Kumamoto has been hit hard, that people are still trapped, that aftershocks are still coming, and that this region, which survived 2016 and rebuilt, is once again in the middle of a seismic sequence that is not yet finished. Subscribe and hit the bell. Because the aftershock situation in Kumamoto is still developing, and the next significant update could come at any moment.